Welcome into the EMA Online podcast as we wrap up our beautiful thoughts as to what happened last night in Allen Fieldhouse, because it wasn't that beautiful if you were a K-State fan. Alec was shaking his head. I assume that's at the banging that continues around his apartment complex. So if you hear any banging, nobody's dying. It's just Alec living in a rough part of town.
That was me actually just smacking my countertop to add emphasis to the annoyance that I've had to deal with today. Things have been vibrating. Sounds like bed frames are being built and unbuilt. And if you've ever been around that, it's really loud and banging and whatever. It's what I woke up to this morning. So that was great. But yeah, happy to bring Gabe on for his first podcast appearance. We got him on Video Fast Break last week in Ames, Mason's favorite college town in the Big 12. So now we're bringing him on to recap his second favorite college town in the Big 12.
I've got no issues with Ames, Iowa. I mean,
okay,
it is what it is. I don't know that I have I don't know. I'm not going to hate on any of the towns. I mean, they're all fine or whatever. It's about the people that are in them, Alec.
Okay. I'm still comprehending the juicy wiggle a week later.
So weird. So weird.
Weird is kind of what they do best at Iowa State. The bridge stuff, the Matt Campbell just being Matt Campbell. It all comes to being weird. Last night, K-State falls 90-78. They get in an early hole, and it felt like maybe KU was going to make it be like any other game in Allen, where K-State goes in there, takes their 20-point loss, and heads back home. Jerome Tang gets his technical foul. He was not pleased with the way the officiating was going early on. Some of it had to do with guys that were getting certain fouls. I also think it just had to do with the fact that, I mean, we'll go to this. This officiating crew was not on their A game last night. And that's not just from one team got more calls than the other. Jerome Tang, I thought, laid it out as well as you could, being the loser in last night's game, basically saying it kind of comes down to, not only is it just about are the calls even, like total foul calls, but it's which ones are getting called and when they are being called. And I agree with that to some extent. And then also, these officials just handle a lot of things from a mechanics standpoint pretty poorly last night. They had to go to the monitor to review shots a lot. Sometimes that's not really their fault. They can't control that necessarily. I'm still convinced that K-State got one extra point that they didn't deserve. The refs called a 2-point shot for Marquise Noel as a 2. His toe was on the line. And the scoreboard and the stats gave him a 3, and it never got corrected, at least to my knowledge, in the second half last night. So that's a weird thing. And just a lot of deals went down there where they just didn't seem to have a handle on it early. But Jerome Tang gets his technical. K-State, from that point, is able to shrink a 9-point lead to a 3-point lead for Kansas. And K-State ultimately has a chance, but they start to turn the ball over. I think in that stretch where the lead for KU went from 3 to 12, K-State ends up with 4 or 5 turnovers in that stretch. They missed some shots, a couple of threes. Keontae Johnson missed a dunk, and Kansas was able to get the lead to 12 by halftime. And ultimately, that's what did K-State in, because their free throw contest in the second half basically negated the chances of a comeback. And that was one of the things I said to Alec after the game was, even if somebody wanted to try and expand the lead or shrink the lead in the second half last night, there was just no way to do it because so many free throws were being shot where nobody could actually play offense or play defense in that second half because you're not getting the chance to make shots and get stops. And that's why it wasn't going to get any tighter in last night's game. I think KU got it up to like 17 in the second half. K-State got it to maybe 5 or 7 in the second half at one point, and nobody could do any more than that. So, essentially, all that, a lot of words for me. K-State fought through the early Allen whistle, as we would call it. Like, there were calls that went KU's way that were pretty fortuitous in the first little chunk that they built their first lead. K-State battled through that well enough, got it shrunk down, made you feel like it was going to be a game, and then they gave the game to Kansas by shooting themselves in the foot with some really bad turnovers, including Marquise Noel, who had 5 of K-State's 10 first-half turnovers last night.
Yeah, I guess I'll take it here quickly about the officiating. And I'm not someone who likes to get into conversations about officiating too often. And a lot of times that's based simply off the fact that, I don't think it generally has a huge outcome or a huge impact on the outcome of a game. But at the same time, I think that the way that it was officiated, particularly in the second half last night, was just really frustrating. There was no flow to the game. I think there was 42 free throws shot combined by the two teams in the second half. K-State shoots 24 of them in the second half. That's just like an absurd number of free throws to shoot. A lot of times, even in a full game, but particularly in a half. So that was just really frustrating. It wasn't a fun game to watch in the second half from either perspective. I would imagine if you were a KU or K-State fan that it was not fun to watch. But yeah, Mason, you hit on it really well too. Like Marquise Noel's continued to struggle with his turnovers. We talked about it after the win on Saturday over Florida that he needs to improve in that area. Has 5 more turnovers against Kansas on Tuesday night. He's averaging over 3 turnovers a game in Big 12 play. And that doesn't show up a ton because he's averaging over 8 assists in Big 12 play. But he only has 4 assists last night against Kansas. So it shows up a little bit more in a loss, especially when you're on the road and you lose by 12 points. So K-State needs their stars to be really good when they're playing really good teams like KU. And last night, Marquise Noel wasn't great. And he wasn't great scoring in the previous outcome against Kansas, but he was great in his ability to facilitate and kind of run the offense in the win over KU at Bramlage, but he was not great in that ability against Kansas on Tuesday. And yeah, he finished with 23 points, but it was pretty inefficient, I thought, Gabe.
Yeah, and I thought more than just the free throws that I've seen way too many times a first half of a big KU game in Allen Fieldhouse against another ranked opponent. And when KU makes 8 of 15 threes in a half, you're not digging yourself out of that hole. I thought that the Tang technical foul, which actually wasn't given to Tang, it was given to the K-State bench, which I thought was weird how it was classified. That led to a 16-6 Kansas run. K-State gets it back to 3, and then there's the second run, and that second run was not fueled at all by fouls. It was the Grady Dick 3. Alec, you pointed out, Keontae Johnson just runs himself into a screen and goes under it. Then Jalen Wilson hits a 3 where Marquise Noel goes under his screen. Naquan gets a late contest. Wilson hits that 3. There's a timeout, and then it's an immediate Tomlin turnover, which leads to the Adams dunk. And that gets it back up. And then the second run, I mean, you get a 3-pointer from Zach Clements at the very end of it. And it was one of those nights where, like, if DeJuan Harris hits 3, if Kevin McCullough's hitting 3s and Zach Clements is hitting 3s, it's kind of just not your night. I would argue that the way that they defended DeJuan Harris is kind of getting outdated. I think Kentucky did it. I think Texas Tech did it. Just completely going under. And DeJuan Harris is never, I've said this to you guys over our text, like he's never going to dribble drive or dribble into a mid-range pull-up, maybe like Marquise Noel would do, or like Desi Sills will, because his jumper off of the dribble just does not look very good. But he's a 42% three-point shooter, and all of his threes are walk-in, wide open, either one dribble and it's going up, or a guy goes under a screen, or he's just catching and he's open. And like he's a good three-point shooter given that context. So for K-State's game plan to be, oh, let's just sag off DeJuan Harris and live with the results, I think that's a game plan that probably needs to die around the conference because it's giving him confidence, which kind of lets everybody else go. I kind of think you've got to take away everybody on Kansas that's not Jalen Wilson and just kind of let Wilson go for his 30 and just hope that if you can keep McCullough under wraps, Grady under wraps, and Harris under wraps, you're in good shape. But when you're not doing that and Marquise is not very efficient, which he wasn't last night, like it doesn't matter what the whistle is, you're not winning that game.
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, it was kind of discussed last night with both coaches talked about it. Jalen Wilson, he had a great night still, but it wasn't what it had been when he was needing to carry Kansas. And I took what Bill Self said, where it's like 133 points that Jalen Wilson scored in the last 5 games for Kansas, but they're 2-3 in those 5 games. And we saw last night where he's on the lower end of that spectrum of scoring for himself. And KU was really balanced. They played 9 different guys. All of them made at least 1 basket, and 8 of those guys had at least 5 points. And that was a total difference from the first game in Manhattan, where K-State won the bench points battle 31-8. Last night it was 19-9 in favor of Kansas. And on the topic of how K-State defended DeJuan Harris, I think not only is this a K-State thing, but this is other teams where, especially after the fact that he was a little bit more aggressive against Kentucky. I mean, he ends up taking 8 shots in the game against Kentucky. That was the most shots that he'd taken in the game since like 20 days prior against Oklahoma. So he had gone 3 weeks essentially without taking more than 5 shots in a game outside of he missed, quite a few against K-State, but he wasn't very confident. But he starts the game with that 3 where it didn't seem like he had any hesitation about letting it fly. I think if you're K-State or any other team, the second you see that, you have to know, okay, the calculus on how we defend him tonight has to change because he's playing differently. You can just tell by the way a guy's going to play if something like that takes place early on. So I think that was a misstep by K-State. I get where some of their logic would have come from. They're obviously very concerned right now about how they defend inside because they've been giving teams a lot of easy looks inside the paint. KJ Adams shredded them the first time they played. He went off for 17. And so I think they were worried about that, but you have to be able to defend a little bit better. And so there was maybe some scheming by K-State that didn't work out. But even when K-State got guys inside and where they seemed to be prepared to defend or were trying to force Kansas into that a little bit more and flex their muscle, they struggled last night. Guys were cutting freely. K-State just looked slow moving and catching up to guys, and it led to Kansas getting some easy baskets at the rim, or because they shot the ball so well, it makes it pretty easy to kick out to 3 if guys are having to try and make up inside. And that's kind of how Kansas sliced and diced K-State last night.
Yeah, and I'll take that here when you talk about the cutting that KU had success with last night. And the 5 film favorites that I just published on the website, and you can read that if you're a subscriber. And if you don't subscribe already to the website, make sure you do that. There's 2 plays that KU used, and I highlighted both of them in the 5 film favorite story. One of them is KJ Adams getting a roll to the basket on the first possession of the second half. And he catches Cam Carter basically just on his heels, sleeping defensively, and Carter just gets beat. And that's just lack of awareness, being lazy, like I thought, on Carter's part. And then they also have a second one where Desi Sills is the one who's caught. And Sills is the one who makes a huge basic defensive error. K-State's in man defense, and he turns his butt to the opposite baseline. He turns his butt to his man instead of having it to the baseline. And it allows Harris to just bolt right past him directly to the rim and get a layup over Bebe, who we know isn't a great rim protector. Yeah, he has good size and pretty decent length, but he's not someone who at this point is a great rim protector. So those are just like basic scouting report things. And we were talking about this in our text thread before we kind of started the show, guys, about just the game plan that K-State had defensively. I didn't love it as I was going back and watching some of the game for the 5 film favorite stuff and just kind of watching parts of it. I don't love the idea of going under teams like Kansas who have really good 3-point shooters like Grady Dick. And I know he's been struggling and he's seen his percentage fall 5 or 6 percentage points since the first game at Bramlage. But Jalen Wilson's been shooting over 45% since that game against K-State. DeJuan Harris is shooting over 40%. And I know Kevin McCullough hadn't been shooting very well at all. Mason, I think you said it was like 8% or something ridiculous. And even Bill Self said after the game, like he couldn't throw the ball in the ocean for the last week or whatever it was. But those are also really good players. And I understand the perspective of make a college team beat you by making 3s instead of making them beat you by making 2s. But at the same time, I feel like that's a little counterintuitive when a team has really good shooters like Kansas does. Dick only goes 1 of 3 from beyond the arc last night, but Wilson goes 4 of 9 to continue his hot shooting. Harris goes 2 for 6, which is pretty on brand for what you would expect from him at this point. And then McCullough has a really good game as well, going 2 of 3 behind the perimeter. And most of his points actually came at the free throw line, 10 of them. So McCullough did a good job of getting to the rim and capitalized on opportunities to make free throws, but he was just 2 of 10 from the field overall.
Yeah, I mean, McCullough, this is McCullough since January 10th, KU's win against Oklahoma. He was 3 of 15, or I guess it was more than that. It was 3 of 16 from 3. So he's 18% over the course of Kansas's last 7 games from 3. And that includes some games where he didn't even attempt one or only had one that he threw up there. So it's tough because you started to maybe think like that was an area where you could cheat a little bit if you're K-State. And I think that in some ways to beat a team like KU, who K-State State has gotten way better this year. They've got more talent than what they have had the last 3 years with Bruce Weber as their coach. They're still nowhere near as talented as Kansas. So when you are the less talented team, especially by a decent margin still, you have to just find some areas where maybe you can kind of cheat and get away with some things. And that's kind of the point in this is Kansas played at a much different level than what they had in recent games against K-State, mainly because they got production from guys that they weren't necessarily counting on at any point recently. And that burnt K-State. And that's going to happen at times. I thought Kansas came out with really good energy. Was pretty locked in there, as opposed to the game in Manhattan for K-State. They seemed to be the team that was a little slow and lethargic to start. Kind of looked like they were shell-shocked a little bit. Was not the case last night. And K-State didn't get the sleepy team that like Oklahoma and Oklahoma State and TCU had seen in Allen Fieldhouse this year.
Well, I think K-State started 4 for 4 from 3 in the game in Manhattan. And that's kind of just like I honestly, watching that game 2 weeks ago, did not think that KU was super lethargic. I thought it was just K-State was making everything. And like they were getting great shots for Keontae. They were getting really solid shots for Marquise early. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Cam Carter made his first one from deep as well. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I was looking into the Kevin McCullough numbers because talking about whether betting on him to make shots is a good idea. He was 6 for 20 from 3 this year in road games, which is like just barely over 25%. But he's 32% in neutral site and home games from 3. So he's like percentage wise, he's a much, much better shooter at home. So I don't know if that was I thought that if we're going for positives, because I know that I wrote about the troubling trend of allowing 90 points per game in road conference games. But if we're talking about positives, I thought K-State did a really solid job of defending Jalen Wilson inside the arc, because in the game in Manhattan, every time that it felt like every time he wanted a right-hand drive, he was getting a right-hand drive and getting the rim. But the play that KU runs where they run it down the screen and they curl Wilson and then he just gets a right-hand drive to the rim, like that did not exist last night for him. And the only one time that they beat him on it was a kick out to DeJuan for 3 when it was 80-70 in the last 4 minutes of the game. So I thought if we're looking for positives, I thought that was a lot better. And I thought Naquan's rebounding was a lot better as well.
Yeah, I would continue that too with K-State's interior defense over the last few games has been better. Think back to the success they had against Colin Castleton. I know he finishes with 13 points, I think it was, in Florida's loss. But they sent a lot of doubles on the catch, and then they also sent a help defender to kind of be in the middle of the lane. So when he was passing away from the double team, cutters weren't able to get easy actions to the rim because K-State had another defender right there in the middle of the paint. But yeah, I think that you kind of consider all these different things with the improvement that K-State's made since a week ago, Gabe, when we were up in Ames for the game against Iowa State. I think both of us were very concerned with what their interior defense was at that point. And it's certainly a lot better, but there's areas where they do need to improve still. Like they haven't, like Castleton's a traditional big in the sense that he's big and that he's most comfortable around the rim, but he's not someone like an Eddie Lampkin, I feel like, who's kind of unique and a unicorn at this point in the Big 12. So I'm interested to see how that kind of morphs into itself. I think K-State plays TCU on Tuesday in Bramlage, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. And Lampkin's obviously been battling some injury stuff here for the last couple of weeks. So I don't even know how available or how healthy Lampkin's going to be for the Horned Frogs. But, we've seen a lot of improvement from this team in a short amount of time, I think, and they've done a really good job of improving their weaknesses, I think, Mason, over the last couple of weeks. And I think that says a lot about the coaching staff and their ability to tinker things and make things different and make weaknesses hidden or maybe even make them a strength at different points.
Yeah, well, and just real quick on Eddie Lampkin, he only played 8 minutes in TCU's home win last night over West Virginia, 76-72. So the Horned Frogs at least survived, and that was also without, obviously, Mike Miles, who went down. I think they ended up saying it was a hyperextension that he had in the game against Mississippi State. So we'll see if Miles is going to be available on Tuesday night. If not, that helps K-State in some ways, but if people remember, Mike Miles didn't do a whole lot against K-State. That was one of his worst games of the season. It was guys like Lampkin and Miller and Baugh that were kind of doing some things to hurt K-State. So that's going to be a matchup where it helps them to have David Gasson ready to go because he was not there for that game. And speaking of David Gasson, Bill Self noted it last night. Even though the result is different, K-State doesn't get the win. Bill Self said K-State's clearly a better team with David Gasson on the floor, and he got to the basket, got into that area sometimes last night. I think just getting into the flow of being able to finish a little bit better again and actually being in game action where things are sped up to a higher level, playing through some of that physicality and contact. I think that will all come in time. And again, he obviously, we would be able to see if he helped a little bit more if K-State wasn't giving up so many good looks from deep early. But Bill Self noted that as well. So that's something to keep in mind moving forward for K-State. Another thing that we talk about here in this conversation is K-State struggling on the road now. Obviously, teams have scored at a very high level when K-State has been on the road. And you kind of look at what they've done now. They've lost 3 straight road games after starting 2-0 on the road in Big 12 play. However, the 5 road games that they have played in Big 12 play through 9 games are at Texas, who's a top 10 team, at Baylor, who's number 11, at TCU, who is number 15 right now, at Iowa State, who is like at 13 or 14, somewhere in that neighborhood, and then at Kansas. 12. Okay, 12. Oh, yeah, they didn't move. And then at Kansas, who is number 8. So they've played the 5 toughest road games they can in the Big 12, and that's something that should be considered. Like, there are obviously things that we should be concerned about when watching K-State and things that the team has to take note of and get better at. But also, they've played the best teams in this league on the road to start the year. Now your remaining road games are Texas Tech, which Tech's a little bit re-energized now. They announced a sellout yesterday for that one, which, I mean, how do you go from like 50 people in attendance against Iowa State to crowd sold out 2 weeks later?
Did you not see Jeff Goodman's mentions?
There was ice in Lubbock, though. So
the entire state of Texas
icy roads.
Jiminy Christmas.
I've got a friend who's flying to London this week for vacation, and her flight was already canceled. She lives in Dallas, so her flight was canceled like a day before. And last night we overheard Chris Budden from ESPN talking about how her flight was canceled this morning out of Lawrence or Kansas City or wherever she was flying out of.
And John Shambi just didn't make it last night, so maybe he had a flight that got canceled in Texas. I don't know, but like K-State, it's going to ease up for them. It's Tech, then it's Oklahoma, then it's Oklahoma State, and then it's Morgantown to end things out.
Well,
and so I mean, those are not easy in any way, but you're not playing top 15 teams like they've played the first 5 road trips of Big 12 play.
Yeah,
so that's something that should be noted, at least in fairness to them. But it's got to be better. Like, defense has to be better. You can't be getting scorched like you are. And the fact that the last 3 games, like 2 of them have been essentially no contest for K-State, where with the last 20 minutes to play, K-State really didn't have a chance to win the game.
Well, so yes, K-State has played objectively the 5 best teams in the league that are not themselves so far, at least in the road games. And I think saying like things are going to ease up for them, I think Jerome Tang would push back on that because this league is insane. And he'd be like, well, are you saying going to a sold out Texas Tech is easy? Like, they're
not saying it's easy, but I'm saying it's much easier than Allen Fieldhouse right now against that team.
Yeah, it is. But what I would say is this: even though TCU is a much better team than, say, Oklahoma State, for example, or Iowa State is a much better team than Oklahoma, and I know that they have played and lost at Oklahoma State or something like that. Iowa State and TCU are not very good offensive teams. Like, they are bottom of the conference offensive teams in efficiency numbers. And I know that the score is higher just because K-State is playing at the number 1 tempo of all Big 12 teams in Big 12 play. So yes, more possessions, there's going to be more points. But contextually, the only teams in the league who are playing worse defense on a per possession basis is Tech, which is 1, and they're 1-8, and then Baylor, who has the number 2 offense in the country in terms of efficiency. So I would say at this point, it's a concern to me for K-State because they've shown a propensity to allow their opponents to get into a comfort zone. So when you go to Morgantown and when you go to Oklahoma and when you go to Oklahoma State, first of all, West Virginia has a top 3 offense in the league. And second of all, we just saw what Oklahoma did against Alabama when Alabama's defense wasn't necessarily on par. So that worries me. But the thing that worries me the most is just that there's such a stress level on Keontae and on Marquise to match scoring wise. If Desi Sills doesn't show up, if Ish Massoud only hits 1 shot, and it seems like every single road game, they're kind of getting into that, oh, we're just going to need our stars to bail us out. And it happened against Baylor. It happened against Texas to start. But for now, it looks like that was just a really, really awesome little week stretch. And now we're kind of seeing, and other teams in the league are seeing, hey, this isn't really super sustainable. That worries me a little bit.
Well, and we saw that last night. I mean, and that's one of the things that does K-State in offensively in last night's game is Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson. They have high scoring nights and they have to have the ball a lot because there weren't a lot of other guys that did much for him. Naquan Tomlin I thought that was a step in the right direction for him last night. He seemed more aggressive. He seemed to get around the basket a little bit more. He's just going to have to learn to finish a little bit better. And I mean, I don't know if you can teach a guy his size and like how frail he kind of still is. Like he needs to fill out that frame a little bit more to be able to hang on to the ball a little bit better. But there's a lot of stress on Noel and Johnson, who combined for 45 points, but they do it on 32% shooting last night. And including Noel, who he gave Jerome Tang enough vitamins to overdose because he ends up going 3 of 11 from 3 last night. So K-State is going to have to find something. They're going to need some other guys to step up. And Desi Sills had that little stretch to start the second half where it looked like he was on and going to help him a little bit, but they just didn't get enough there. And Jerome Tang, after the game, put a little bit of that on himself. I mean, he put a lot of it on himself because that's what coaches do, especially Jerome Tang. But basically saying, like, getting Gasson back, I have to be better about figuring out rotations, how to get guys into the game, how to get them into certain situations for us. And that really is something K-State's going to have to work on here over the next couple of games is David Gasson is back, but you do still have other guys that are warranting minutes and have certain roles that they can serve for you, like an Ish Massoud, who the way he's shooting, he's over 50% in Big 12 play right now. Like, he needs to be on the floor with you because he does help the offense and gives you at least a couple of possessions where the stress is not on Noel and Johnson to do something crazy, because Massoud has been pretty reliable for a kick out and a knockdown 3. And those are huge in the Big 12 because, as we saw last night, Kansas ran away from this game not with a bunch of 2-pointers and you know, those back cuts that K-State was slow on that we talked about that were evident and have to be cleaned up. It was the fact that they were nailing not only threes, but significant ones that extended the lead to, you know, over like a 2-possession margin, and also on the road are going to get the fans really fired up.
To go back to the schedule aspect of things real quick, and it's obviously K-State's obviously in an advantageous spot. And I think Bill Self even said a similar thing last night after the game, because he was asked a few different times about what that win for them meant in terms of the Big 12 title race. And he made a point to say similar things that you did, Mason, about how K-State's already had the fortune of going on the road and playing some of the teams that we consider to be contenders to win the Big 12. And that obviously includes Texas, Iowa State, TCU, Kansas, obviously, and then Baylor. So they've gone on the road and played the 5 other contenders in the league, if that's what you want to consider Baylor at this point, because they're 2 games behind Texas, who has sole possession of first place. But only one of those teams has come to Bramlage. And I think it's kind of important to kind of understand that K-State's had a really unfortunate road schedule at this point where they've had to go play some of the best teams, but they've done a really good job of beating some of those teams on the road, obviously Texas and Baylor. But they also have maybe really benefited from a really favorable home schedule at this point. And things are going to get more tough for them at home. And the key to winning a conference title in any league, but particularly the Big 12, is going to be protecting home court. And I think that's one of the reasons why Kansas has had so much success winning the Big 12 over the last 20 years or whatever it is because they don't lose more than 1 game at Allen Fieldhouse every single year. And now K-State has an opportunity to protect home floor against a really good Texas team who's playing really, really well, and they play really hard. And then TCU comes to town, and that's a big opportunity as well. But even some of their next 3 games, I think, are really, really telling for what this team is going to be. And you said this last night after the game in the video fast break was, we're going to understand real quick if this team is good enough to contend for a Big 12 title or if they're just contending for a seeding at this point, because they have Texas coming up at home. They then get TCU at home a week from Tuesday. And then they have to go on the road to play Texas Tech in a game that Bart Torvik currently has projected as a tie. So
I feel good about that happening.
Well, it's 0-0. Like, that's, you know what I mean? So it's going to get tough. And then they have to go on the road and play Oklahoma, a team that Bart Torvik actually thinks Oklahoma's going to win that game. He's got him as a 1.7 point favorite right now. So things are going to get more tough at home, but it does get easier on the road. So it's going to be really important for K-State to protect home floor. I think if they're going to be able to maintain in this race atop the Big 12 standings, because I think we both felt if they were able to split one of the games at Iowa State or the game at Kansas, that they would be in a great position to win the league, and they lost both of them. So now it's almost, it doesn't run through Manhattan anymore. Like currently right now it runs through Austin, because Austin in Texas is in first place by themselves. But K-State can kind of wiggle their way back in there if they beat Texas on Saturday, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're absolutely right. And that's why this game this weekend, like my direct comment that I mentioned in the fast break last night was, so right now Texas is standalone first, like they are the front runner in the Big 12. And what this game this weekend means for K-State is if you beat Texas, you are still alive in the Big 12 title conversation, because now you have again beaten one of the top teams in the league. You guarantee that you're in a tie for first place in the conference after Saturday, and that's with 8 games remaining. So that's a good thing. But if K-State loses to Texas this weekend, it probably starts to alert you that, okay, K-State has now gone and lost that would be 3 straight Big 12 losses. If K-State loses to Texas this weekend, TCU coming to town, it might mean that, okay, K-State can still play with anybody in this league. They are still a very good team, still a top 15 type team in the country, but they're not the team that should be in the top 10 and thought of as a Big 12 title contender. The focus more so shifts to now you're playing for seeding and trying to keep yourself around that 4 or 5 seed line, as opposed to like slipping and falling down to the level a little bit more. So it's a huge game, because I mean, again, just like I thought the game against Texas Tech and seeing how K-State responded after a big emotional win on a Tuesday against Kansas was, this is another one where you get to prove yourself and go out there and kind of tell everybody you're still the real deal, or if it was just kind of a cute story and an apparition to start the season. And the way that we need to talk about K-State is the way they've played so far and the way they set things up for themselves. Like, if they're not in the Big 12 title conversation come the last 3 or 4 games of the season, it's going to be a disappointment now because of the way they started. And last night in Lawrence, like, they have nobody to blame but themselves for that loss. Like, I know it's really fun and it's easy to blame the refs when you go and lose in Allen Fieldhouse, because pretty much everybody can do it. And like, I'm not going to try and, take the high ground and say, oh no, that's overblown. Like, no, people know, like, you're going to get some friendlier calls there if you're Kansas and Allen Fieldhouse. That wasn't the case last night. K-State shot themselves in the foot against the Jayhawks in that latter part of the first half, and that's what set them behind. So the things that they have to clean up, Noel and Johnson have to become more efficient. You have to guarantee that there is going to be a third guy that can at least step up. And it's not just about scoring in double figures, but it's about him also doing some things that aren't going to show up in the stat sheet and hitting big shots when you need them, kind of silencing and stopping some bleeding. And so we'll see how that works out for K-State. And then the turnovers have to get clean. And we'll see if Marquise Noel can kind of settle down a little bit with – it's really the live ball turnovers that lead to K-State having to scramble on the other end, where, like a loose ball or something, most of the time, like, guys are on the floor, things, you have a little bit more time to reset. A lot of Noel's passes just get picked off cleanly, and all of a sudden the other team's running down the floor and they've got like a 4-on-2 or at least, some kind of odd numbered break in their favor. So K-State's got to get those corrected, and Texas is going to be one heck of a challenge. But if the Wildcats can do it and win this weekend, it means that they're right back to where we thought they were a week ago.
Yeah, Mason, I thought that the self-inflicted part of last night was not the first big Kansas run. I thought it was the second big Kansas run in the first half, because that was a situation where you already know that you've used 2 timeouts in the first half. And the only 2 guys on this K-State roster who had played a basketball game in that building before were Marquise Noel and Ish Bassoud. And obviously Marquise has significantly more impact on the game and more control of the game because the ball's in his hands significantly more. And I know that Tang's back. His back is to Tang because they're running offense on the other end of the floor than where their bench is. And so I thought one of the possessions, Marquise needed to slow it down and understand that a 25-second possession that results in just a miss is better than a 12-second possession that results in a live ball steal for Grady Dick and another Jalen Wilson 3 on the other end. And that's where it just felt like the Allen Fieldhouse snowball effect happened to K-State, and it felt like no one on K-State had played in that building before, and that was the most apparent situation, and that was where they had to use their 3rd timeout. And once you've used up 3 in the first half in that building, it just hurts your chances in the second half. But to go back on your schedule point, Texas is in the driver's seat. TCU, I know, only has 3 losses, but we've already seen Baylor have a 3-game losing streak in this league. We've already seen KU have a 3-game losing streak in this league. I know K-State could have a 3-game losing streak if they lose to Texas on Saturday, but TCU is also facing road game against Oklahoma State on Saturday, road game at K-State on Tuesday, and then revenge opportunity for Baylor. So, like, I think what I'm trying to say is everybody in this league is going to get got at some point, and it would not surprise me if, like, every single top 6 team in this league, which we think it's a 6 team and then cut off of a gap, it wouldn't surprise me if all 6 of them at some point have multiple 2-game losing streaks or at least 1 3-game losing streak. So,
well,
I don't think that Texas is in as much control as people would think, because, like, they still have the schedule loss that is a trip to Allen Fieldhouse on their schedule on Monday night. So it could get real bad for them if they lose to K-State Saturday, turn around and lose on Monday.
And that's the thing. So there are a lot of teams here that are in positions where, like, your neck is not out of the woods here. Like, here's the foreseeable future Big 12 schedule. So this weekend, Texas is at K-State. They then follow it up with the trip to Allen Fieldhouse on Tuesday. So they have that short turnaround. They'll spend the week in the state of Kansas and
that game's on Monday.
Hope for the best. Oh, it is? Okay, so you got an even shorter turnaround then.
They'll still never lost a big Monday at home.
KU has to go. KU has to go to Hilton this weekend, and, like, that crowd will be fired up for it. That's always a tight game up there. So KU could get it, but also, like, this is where things drastically change to Iowa State, because they have, of the teams that are contending right now, I mean, it's obvious. They have the worst loss in the league, losing to Texas Tech. Nobody else had lost to them in the league yet, and Iowa State did it, blowing a 23-point lead with 12 minutes left to play. So if Iowa State loses this weekend, things start to look pretty gruesome for the Cyclones, because Iowa State, they still have to come to Manhattan and also go to Austin, and they finish the last day of the regular season in Waco against Baylor. So they still have 3 major road trips on their schedule. They also have to have a home game with TCU. So they've got that to kind of go off of. And so that's, to your point, they're a team that's in a tough position. TCU, similar type of situation. They have the leg up on some people because they got the win in Allen Fieldhouse. Not many teams are going to get that, but they are still going to have to find ways to, if you could steal a win in Manhattan, steal a win in Ames, or, after that, you've got home games left with Baylor, KU, and Texas. So they've got a lot on their plate, and K-State obviously does too, but, like, this thing is not over for anybody after one more loss. Like, even K-State, if they lose this weekend, even though I say, like, we'll kind of have a good idea, because I think we will get kind of a vibe off of that game. If K-State loses on, like, a last-second shot or something, and it's just cleanly played game, and Texas just got the ball last and won it, K-State's not out of this thing, and we'll feel differently about them. But the Big 12 is very much wide open right now. And the only reason why Texas has the advantage is just because they have one less loss than everybody else. And we'll see if that's enough for them. But the conference is going to look drastically different over the next set of 2 games that get played Saturday and then the midweek games next week. And it's going to be fascinating to kind of follow along and watch it all play out.
I just think it's so tough to kind of project and predict where teams are going to win and lose. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if any team went on the road and lost at Oklahoma or went on the road and lost at Texas.
Well,
Tech.
we know that any top team can do it because Alabama just got smoked there this past weekend.
And Texas Tech, like, as much as people like to point out the fact that they were 0-8 in the league and they had gotten blown out a couple times, like, that's still a team that is pretty good. I guess, like, in comparison to most other teams that are 0-8 in their league, like, that's a pretty good basketball team. So, like, I wouldn't be surprised if any team goes on the road and loses at Texas Tech. This last go play them, especially if that arena is going to get loud and have a lot of energy in it. Again, we've heard people say that that's as tough of a place to play, if not more tough than Allen in the last couple years or whatever. So, yeah, it's just really tough to kind of project, I think, who's going to win and who's going to lose. I just think it becomes really important for you to protect your home floor. And if you're not going to protect your home floor, it just puts so much pressure on you to go on the road and get wins. And that's why I think, like, the game between Kansas and Iowa State this weekend at Hilton is so important, because Iowa State hasn't lost a home game this year. And neither is K-State, obviously, but it's a lot different when you have Kansas coming into town. And that's why I feel like K-State felt like they were in such a good position heading into their last 2 Big 12 games, was because they had banked so many good wins already against other teams that were contenders. And now it just becomes a really important for them, I think, to take care of business if they want to continue to fight atop the Big 12 standings and potentially raise another trophy. Or we'll get our dream scenario where the 6 teams all tie for the league regular season title, and then one of the 3 or 4 other teams ends up winning the conference tournament title in Kansas City. So we've got 7 champions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I like what you say there about that. And thinking about K-State, like, with the losses that they've stacked up now in Big 12 play, TCU is the only one where early in that game, I just wrote it off. I was like, this thing's over. Like, I had conceded it at that point. K-State had chances in Ames and in Lawrence to arguably win the game. Like, K-State, they lost it pretty quickly once they shrunk the lead down to 3. But after they survived that first run, I thought, okay, this might be a little bit different, and maybe this team can handle things a little bit differently than those in past years. And they ultimately couldn't, because they let Kansas get back out. And they even got it down to like 5 or 6, 5 minutes into the second half last night. So K-State has at least shown some fight in those games. We'll just have to see if they can kind of battle it out when they go on to these road games that they should win. And then you're going to have to back it up at home. But any other thoughts from either of you from last night's game and Allen that needs to be noted about the Wildcats?
I can't believe Desi Sills only ended up with 1 shot. It felt like he took a million, but it was
he got fouled a lot. So
he had 8 free throws.
But the 1 shot he took, I just shook my head. I was like, good night. That's not the one that you need. But you know, that's Desi being Desi. And you go with it sometimes.
Another double-double for Keontae Johnson, which sounds a little ho-hum, but on a team that has a lot of bigs that Jerome Tang is constantly like, hey, we could really use some more rebounding out of our bigs. It's super helpful that Keontae Johnson is the rebounder that he is for this team.
Oh, absolutely. And like, that was one of those things that I immediately recognized. Like, even in the game, the exhibition against Washburn this year, Keontae Johnson just went up and grabbed rebounds. I was like, K-State has not had that in a long time. Like, I mean, that 3-year stretch was brutal. And as we've seen this season progress, we still haven't seen it really from anybody but Keontae Johnson. And that's one of the things that Alec and I talked about last week after the Iowa State game was K-State's going to have to find some guys that can be a little bit more aggressive there. Naquan Tomlin should be one of them. Like, he's got a size advantage on a lot of dudes. He's got an athleticism advantage by a mile on a lot of the guys he's banging with in there. Like, I forget just the classic Hoosiers, get your butt into somebody's front and box them out. Like, go up and try and grab the ball at this point and be aggressive for it. And it's a little disappointing that K-State hasn't been better in that regard. Hopefully David Gasson, as he continues to progress, gives him a little bit more there. But that was one of the things that Ish Masood was bad at last night. Like, there was one play where I thought he had a chance to get in there, get a pretty important rebound for K-State, and it just seemed like he got nowhere close to being able to do anything. And I think it maybe even led to like an offensive rebound for Kansas. And again, at that point, like, you're just kind of done in when you give the Jayhawks second chance opportunities, which was something K-State was actually good at preventing the first matchup in Manhattan.
Yeah. I'll also say, looking at the schedule, Tuesday, February 21st for the Jerome Tang. He gets Baylor back in Manhattan. Seems like a good time for Travis Kelce to make a trip to Manhattan.
There you go. Yep. There you go. There's a lot of consternation there. I mean, look, I get how it can be kind of conflicting and like why, some people would be maybe minorly upset by that. But as Mitch Fortner pointed out, Travis Kelce was at a K-State women's basketball game like 4 years ago. And like, I don't know, like KU is the closest one. And he showed up to a game where he doesn't really have any rooting interest there. Like, he went to Cincinnati. I don't think he really cared who won last night's game. He's just going to a marquee sports event, an hour away from where he's living. Like, let him do what he wants to do. He gets caught up in the emotion of it. And
he did go out with Grady Dick after the game, though.
Yeah, he hit the triangle in Lawrence, but
maybe I suck, but also like I'm not a Chiefs fan, so I really don't care what Travis Kelce does. So maybe Chiefs fans feel differently about it than me, but I don't get all the commotion. Like, that's just something Kelce has to live with. Like, if there is some pushback by your Chiefs fans that are K-State or Missouri, like, you do have to deal with it, live with the consequences. But Travis Kelce's a grown-ass man, and I don't think he really cares what people think about him.
How many craps do you think Travis Kelce gives if Mizzou Chiefs fans or K-State Chiefs fans are not as all in on himself or the Chiefs because he decided to go watch?
My guess is
the KU locker room afterwards and go out with Grady Dick.
All the Chiefs fans that popped off those angry tweets last night are probably not even going to remember it 2 weeks from now when the Chiefs are playing in the Super Bowl. But that's just my guess. And by the way, like, as a K-State fan and not a Chiefs fan, I would like to see the Chiefs win the Super Bowl still, because I do not want to see the Philadelphia Eagles win it. But that's just me. All right, I want to do a little exercise here. I'm sure you boys, as basketball aficionados, have been to the great website known as bballnotnothing.net. Have you guys ever been here?
No.
Okay, it's going to become your favorite tool. It's like the playoff machine.
Oh, boy.
Look at this. So we're going to go through here. We're going to vote on all the remaining Big 12 games, and we're going to calculate basically the seeding and the standings at the end of the season. So we got one game left this
week. Was totally made by an Iowa State guy, wasn't it?
I don't know. It's beautiful. You can do it for every conference, though. So go and take your pick. So, Alec, if you want to go calculate what the Illinois women might have their chance to win the
they're kind of good this year.
Go do it. Okay, well, hang your hat on.
They might make the NCAA tournament for the first time since like 2003.
Oh, yuck! Cats have been there, done that many times.
Well, we don't have Jeff Mitty.
Yeah, I know. I mean, some schools just support women's athletics, Alec. I don't know what to tell you. I guess a bunch of chauvinists up there in Champaign. Makes sense.
We've got a
soft CH program. Okay, well, good for you. Oklahoma's got great gymnastics, male and female. So they do it all down there.
We've got a great men's gymnastics program too. What are we talking about here?
Okay. All right. Well, I didn't know. All right. Any thoughts on Oklahoma State tonight?
That one's in Norman, right?
Yes, I believe
Oklahoma.
it is.
Oklahoma.
Oh, I thought it was nice ad there, Mason. You a big feet guy?
Yeah, the sponsored ads are just horrendous on here. Let's see. If you own a mouse, you have to try this game. Because I like to experience the internet the way it was meant to be, Alec. It's in Norman.
Give me the Sooners, baby.
Okay. A lot of good energy there. I still am not sure Mike Boynton's a good in-game coach. All right, so we're giving it to Oklahoma this weekend. Baylor, Texas Tech. Yeah, I think we all think Baylor is winning there. Iowa State, KU. Kansas has fixed some of their problems now. They're not losing to Iowa State.
This is the Iowa State 3-game losing streak.
K-State at home against Texas. I'll let you two vote on this because I have my thoughts.
What to expect on Saturday, because I put nothing to the game that happened in Austin. because it was so weird. Like no one ever scores 116 points in a college game. So I have no expectations going into the game on Saturday. I have zero clue of what is
Okay,
coming.
that wasn't the question. I just asked
I
who you
will
think was going
say-
to win this weekend.
I'll step up to the podium and I will say I think K-State wins on Saturday. Texas is 227th in the nation in 3-point percentage, and they will not shoot well in the Octagon of Doom.
That's all right. Alec, what's your vote?
I'll take K-State. They protected home court well this year.
Okay. Well, then I can't be the tiebreaker because I was going to take Texas. So we're giving it to the Cats.
So does that mean
even
you're
though
picking Texas for the preview?
I think I am. Even though Texas is kind of due for a loss. Like everybody else in the Big 12 has hit that stretch where they're due for a loss. Whatever. Oklahoma State at home against TCU. These teams are going to match up pretty well. I think Oklahoma State wins, especially if Miles is still out. And
Bryce
Lampkin's limited.
Yeah, I'll give you Oklahoma State. I kind of like this Oklahoma State team, to be honest with you.
All right, West Virginia at home against Oklahoma. Really, this game's going to come down to does Oklahoma find their shot on the road, or does Eric Stevenson either make all 29 of his shots or does he miss all 29 of them? Because that's kind of how it's gone this year. He either scores 7 points in a game or 55. So I think West Virginia probably wins at home.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
They can't lose every single road or every single home conference game.
Yeah, you would think so. All right. Midweek games next week. KU at home against Texas. We already decided Kansas is winning that. This Texas team is too soft to win in Allen Fieldhouse. I'm just going to say that. They're barely mentally tough enough to win some of their home games.
Soft is not an adjective I would use to describe this Texas team.
I would use soft to describe every single Texas team in every single sport for the last 50 years and the next 50 years, Alec. They're all soft. They are all soft. It's a mentality there. Texas is soft.
Elite volleyball program, though.
The only thing that is hard down there is the Texas volleyball team. That's a hard mentality, soft mentality, the rest of them. Then we got K-State at home against TCU. I think K-State probably wins that one, especially since it would seem like TCU's trending to having maybe their two biggest K-State killers limited in Miles and Lampkin.
I'll give you that.
Baylor at home against Oklahoma. They're not losing that one. Tech at Oklahoma State is an interesting one. Is Tech fixed now? Are they going to start winning some more games? Are they going to be competitive again? Gabe thinks no. Alec, you got any thoughts there?
Yeah, they've always been competitive, but I don't know how competitive they're going to be or continue to be against a quality defensive team like Oklahoma State. So I don't think they're completely fixed, no.
Okay, well, we'll give it to Oklahoma State. Iowa State at West Virginia. I would lean towards Iowa State winning that game. I think you're going West Virginia. You're confident in them. That's my problem with the bottom of the league right now. Oklahoma State, West Virginia, and Texas Tech. I'm not in Oklahoma. I'm not confident in seeing them string together multiple wins. I think that's tough for them.
I just have so much trouble buying into Iowa State offensively on the road.
I have trouble buying into Iowa State offensively in any gym.
Unless K-State's defending them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. You guys overrule me there. All 5 home teams winning the midweek games next week. I'm sure that will hold up in the Big 12. Saturday next weekend, Oklahoma State at Iowa State. Iowa State should win that game at home. KU will win in Norman. I'm not worried about that one. Now, if it was in Stillwater, again, Bill Self likes to kick a couple games to his alma mater. Baylor at TCU. Okay, screw off bball.nothing.net. Baylor's winning that game. I assume you guys feel the same way. Alex still thinks they're the best team in the Big 12.
I don't think that, but I think they're very good.
West Virginia at Texas next weekend.
Yeah, that's a
hook 'em.
That's a UT win.
K-State at Texas Tech. Here you go. They bball not nothing. I'm gonna smack whoever did this. They got Tech beating K-State in United Supermarkets Arena. Where are we going there? That's going to be a tricky one.
Over under 79.5 points for Tech that day.
That would be pretty embarrassing because they're not good offensively either. And what they scored 55 the first game in Manhattan, the 65-55 the final score. So I hope they don't score that many points. That's a tough one.
I think K-State probably wins that game.
It's
But
not going to be comfortable.
No. Oh no. But that's a lot of these games for these teams that are going to be contending for the Big 12 title. They're going to be very uncomfortable. Like the fact that like Kansas last night in a game where at multiple points their 17-point lead could shrink down to close to single digits again, and at least you could see an area where things got froggy. Like those are the most comfortable wins that most of these teams are going to get in the conference this year. There's not going to be many runaway performances. And that's what the beauty of the Big 12 SEC Challenge was for the Big 12. They had a lot of teams that could just play from in front and catch their breath for a game finally. Moving on deeper into the season, West Virginia at Baylor. Baylor probably wins that one. Texas at Texas Tech. Yeah, Texas.
Oh, I don't
K-State.
know.
Oh,
that's Chris Beard's music.
Yeah, but do they care now that he's
anymore.
been canned? They might buy Texas some beers while they're down there now. Be like, hey, congrats. I think Texas wins that game.
Over under Chris Beard mugshot photos, 6.5 in the Texas Tech student section.
Loads of them. Great
Way
signs
over.
too. I can't wait to see that. That's going to be great. But it's going to be like a jovial, like, oh, hey, you had to fire your coach because he's a bad dude type of thing. Like, good thing he's not our guy. Or something along the lines of somebody needs to have a sign that like is unaware that Beard was the head coach at Texas Tech at one point and be like classic Texas or something. K-State at Oklahoma that same week. Or we thinking the Sooners get the win in the Lloyd Noble Mall.
I think K-State wins.
Okay.
KU at Oklahoma State.
I don't really think the Oklahoma team's very good, to be honest with you. I think they're near the bottom of the league. I think they're the 9th or 10th best team in the league.
Oklahoma is very much a wild card because it's Sherfield and Groves, and even Groves sometimes disappears.
Yeah.
And then if you get, one of the other random kick-ins to go for like 4 threes in the game, they have a chance. So it's just the percentage chance, I think, of Oklahoma winning that seems very low. All right, KU Oklahoma State in Stillwater.
I think KU's
on this with me.
I think KU is losing 2 more road games, and I think they're going to finish with 5 losses in conference play, and that will be at Oklahoma State and at Texas at the end.
Okay. All right. TCU at Iowa State. We given Iowa State the home win there.
Yeah.
Okay. There we go. Although TCU going to want revenge from losing in a wacky way that first time. February 18th, KU hosting Baylor. KU will win that game. Baylor has typically not played very well in Allen Fieldhouse. K-State hosting Iowa State. That's K-State's shot at revenge. How do the Clones fare there? You going Cats?
Not well.
Yeah. K-State wins.
Okay. TCU hosting Oklahoma State. Those two teams, like, they're just going to want to punch each other the entire game, but TCU should probably win that thing just because they have slightly better players and they have a way better coach on their sideline. Texas hosting Oklahoma. I'm not worried about Texas at home against Oklahoma. And then Tech at West Virginia. That's a battle of 2 teams that probably feel like they're the most unlucky in the league. West Virginia should win that game at home. So we'll move on.
I think West Virginia is a tournament team.
I agree. They definitely should be. They're just going to – for West Virginia, it's when Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, and Texas Tech show up on your schedule, you can't lose those games now. As long as they do that, they'll get in no matter what the rest of their schedule looks like. And maybe they'll be like that 2017 K-State team that needed to show up to Kansas City and like feel a little bit better if you got a good win in round 1. K-State beat Baylor that year. Corby Irvin hit a 3 for like the first time in his life in the corner, and I about lost my mind. But great times. That was my freshman year at K-State, and I was in the middle of class, and the guy I was going to Kansas City with that night for the game, because K-State was playing last game of the night against Baylor, and we had to get up there by a certain time to go to the hotel and pick up our tickets we bought. And I was in the middle of one of like my media classes. It was like 3 hours long, and I'm gonna have to leave early if class doesn't get out like early as I thought it would. And at one point, like I just had to stand up, most awkward I ever was. And I like had to straight up just tell the professor, I was like, hey, I'm going to the K-State game in Kansas City tonight. Like I got to leave. And I didn't even really give her a chance to say anything to me. I just walked out. So that was a brave moment for me. That it became much easier for me to just skip class by my sophomore year. All right, February 20th and 21st, TCU hosting KU. They're giving it to TCU right now because they use like predictive metrics there. I don't think KU's losing in Fort Worth.
No.
All right, we're going with the Hawks. West Virginia hosting Oklahoma State, kind of like what we said. If West Virginia wants to be a tournament team, they got to win that. K-State at home against Baylor. It's gonna be a good game, and I mean that could go either way. So I'll defer to you guys.
I think that's a Baylor win. I think Baylor should have won the first game.
I would agree. Baylor's playing better now. Their guys are hitting shots at a more consistent rate, and I don't know. We'll just have to see how it plays out. OU at home.
Everyday John might be back by that point too.
Okay, that we didn't need that. Thank you though. You can say his name, Jonathan Chamwa Chachua. It's not that hard. We don't need to call him his nickname every 5 seconds. Fran Fraschilla, Jay Billis, whoever you are, the Everyday John nickname. Stop it. Oklahoma, Texas Tech. I don't know. We'll give it to Oklahoma. Texas at home against Iowa State. I'll give it to the Longhorns since Alec loves them. Texas at Baylor, February 25th.
Baylor.
Okay. Oklahoma at Iowa State. That's Iowa State. KU at home against West Virginia. Bob Huggins never wins there. K-State at Oklahoma State. That's a Saturday. I think it's like a 1:00 tip. It'll be a dead Gallagher-Iba. Madison Square Garden on the Plains. Okay, we're giving it the Cats. TCU at Texas Tech. That's a big-time rivalry there.
That's a loss for TCU.
USA is going to be popping. I'm with Gabe. I was going to give that to Texas Tech. Okay. Following week, last week of the regular season, the Big 12, West Virginia at Iowa State. Anything from the peanut gallery?
Iowa State will win because it's at home. They won't lose another game at home other than the KU game, I don't think.
Okay. That makes sense.
Bob Huggins will get beat up that day.
Yeah. From his stool, just slapping his legs, throwing the hands in the air, barely moving. I love Huggins, though. Revive K-State basketball. Put his jersey in the rafters in Bramlage. Let's see. Baylor at Oklahoma State. Baylor should probably win that game. Even though Oklahoma State, I guess, could muck it up with them. And if Bryce Thompson remembers that he was like a 4 or 5 star guy that went to Kansas initially, as opposed to a flame out that went to Oklahoma State and scores 20 like once every 7 games. I don't know. KU, Texas Tech in Allen. There's no way this Texas Tech team wins in Allen unless, like, I don't know, unless they punch everybody and maybe they like hurt everybody on KU's roster. Like that's the only way Tech wins that game. K-State probably should beat Oklahoma at home. TCU, Texas in Shawmar. I think Texas wins that game. I think TCU is the team that's most likely to fizzle out of the conference race right now because I just don't know that they're built to sustain and be able to keep up with a lot of these other teams.
Yeah, I think Texas beats them. I would argue that I think Baylor might be in that conversation a little bit too because they don't play defense very well.
Well, neither does K-State.
Yeah, so. I was gonna say I don't. I would.
Okay. Maybe Scott Drew's carbon copy also doesn't do that very well.
In a league full of teams that play great defense and everyone is top 63 in the country in Ken Palm adjusted defensive efficiency, I'm shocked that we think the 3 teams that don't play super great defense are going to fizzle out.
Yeah. All right. March 4th, Baylor at Iowa State or Baylor at home against Iowa State. Baylor should win that. TCU at Oklahoma. KU at Texas. Is that one of the games you thought KU would lose, Gabe?
If KU does not need to win that game for the league title, they will lose that game. If they need it, they will win it.
Okay, that's not how bballnotnothing.net works. I don't know what we've picked and what we haven't. So, Horns or Hawks?
I will say for now, the Longhorns win it because I don't think it will matter.
Okay. Oklahoma State at Texas Tech. This could be a big one for Oklahoma State if they're trying to stick around in the bubble conversation.
Yeah, that's a huge game for Oklahoma State. I'll give it to them.
Okay. K-State at West Virginia. This could be for a league title for all we know. And who knows? Maybe we road trip out to Morgantown and drive.
No. I think that's a similar situation for West Virginia as Oklahoma State's in, potentially. Needing a win against a quality opponent to get into the NCAA tournament comfortably. So who wins, Gabe?
West Virginia wins that game.
Okay. Well, I'll let you guys do it since you're country road me. I was going to give K-State the win there. All right, here we go. Moment of truth. This has taken forever, but it's been fun. Calculation of the seeds. Oh, we've got a four-way tie for the conference title. K-State, KU, Baylor, and Texas at 13 and 5. And K-State has the tiebreaker to get the number 1 seed in the Big 12 tournament by way of beating Baylor, KU, and Texas in the round robin 4-2. Because what? That would give them 2 wins against Texas that we gave them. So that gives them the leg up. KU would get the 2 seed with Baylor beating Texas and losing to K-State on the round robin 3-3. They defeated all these tiebreakers play out. In the scenario we laid out, Texas Tech goes 2-16 in Big 12 play. They are currently 1.
That's probably not going to happen.
They're currently 1-8, so they're on track for that.
I feel like they'll do better than that. They'll get to 4 or 5 wins.
We have disrespected Iowa State, dropping them to 10-8 in league play. We think that they're going to struggle. And TCU, we have them getting to 8-10, which, if you know your Big 12 history, Alec, that would continue the stretch. How perfect would that be? They're a game out of first place halfway through the regular season, and they still fall under 500. But there you have it. That's what it looks like right now. And that would ideally set up for what we want, and that's a K-State KU Big 12 championship game. Have them on opposite sides of the bracket in Kansas City and play each other there. But I'd take that. I would take that. That's even with the road loss at West Virginia. I mean, come on. That's a good scenario for K-State.
If that plays out that way, Texas might be the greatest 4 seed in a conference tournament history.
Well, yeah. I mean, how many conferences have ever had more than like 3 tie for a conference title? I don't even know the last conference that had 3 tie for a conference title.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, you could legitimately have a team that's like a no doubter NCAA tournament team playing on like Wednesday night.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, looking at it right now, like Oklahoma State, if Oklahoma State goes 7-11 in the Big 12, they're getting into the NCAA tournament, I think. But also, like similar, like TCU, if they drop one in this scenario that we have laid out here, they could be that team in 7th. And ultimately, then, like, we know TCU's in. So kind of crazy. Like, you could be a 7 seed in your conference tournament, but also a 7 seed in the NCAA tournament. But I don't know. Kind of a fun thing to do. That'll do it for us since we've gone well over time and had a great time in doing so. We will be back on Friday to preview the game with Texas and everything that comes with that. You can be sure to get signed up over at EMA Online on Rivals if you haven't already. Get access to all the content from post-game last night for K-State and KU. And even though maybe we started off and made you feel a little bit down about the Wildcats, I think we ended this on a real positive note by giving them the number 1 seed in Kansas City.
Yeah, I'm fired up for the last second half of the Big 12 season, and I'm excited for some more high-profile games to come to Bramlage. I think that'll be a lot of fun because we saw how awesome it was for the game against Kansas, and well, I don't think that's replicable. I think Texas on Saturday, it's going to be awesome. I think TCU coming next week will be big time. And I think Baylor coming into town will be awesome as well. So I'm just fired up. Iowa State too, to see some good environments and then continue making some road trips.
Yep. I'm so jacked up to be here right now.
Okay, Chris Kleiman. You almost choke on your water there. For those of you not watching, Mason's literally choking on his water as he's trying to not laugh.
No, I wasn't trying to laugh. I sucked in too much. But yes, that was I love Chris Kleiman, but if anybody, was around in my days on the game at K-Man, 2019 Halloween, Chris Kleiman was one of the coaches that I dressed up as, but it was more of a radio bit. So I had to kind of talk and do some of his mannerisms, which were I'm just so jacked up to be here right now. From when he told Gene Taylor he would be so jacked up to be the next head football coach at Kansas State. Also, football is football. You got to throw one of those in there. And then the man chugs a water bottle after games. Like, he just hammers it home. And I was on there and I was putting away the water bottle. Yeah, it's like a hard squeeze. Whereas, like, Bruce Weber, it was like he was trying to drink out of a water bottle as like the Incredible Hulk, where he was like very dainty with it. And he was just like he was having to squeeze out every last drop. I just noticed weird drinking habits of the head coaches. So that's just one of those things.
If you guys ever run into Mason and you listen to this, ask him for an impersonation of either Chris Kleiman, Bruce Weber, or Jerome Tang. They're all spot on and they're all hilarious.
My Chris Kleiman one really isn't that great. Some of the mannerisms I can hit, but I don't have like the voice down. I'm more proud of like my Bruce voice. The Tang one is getting better. I think I actually do a pretty good Bill Self. I did Bill Self that same Halloween. Showed up with a wig on and like a suit coat with a couple dollar bills stuffed in the front pocket there. And with Bill Self, you got to be kind of relaxed. And I don't know what to tell you. Like, that's a good team. Bruce got a good team over there. They play well. But I tell you what, for us last night, Jalen played one of those games. And when we got other guys that step up, I tell you what, we're a pretty good basketball team. I don't know if you guys remember that. And then, Bruce walks in there. Well, I don't know what to tell you. They're all great. We play in such a great league. It's a phenomenal place to be. But we were on the magic level tonight. It was just one of those games. Barry! So that's how you know this has gone a little too far. I've not been very buttoned up the last 10 minutes of this and dipped into playing my. I felt
like I was watching Big Ten Network at the very end there.
Well, who else is on the Big Ten Network?
Robbie Hummel.
I don't know.
Stephen Bardo.
Well, Robbie Hummel. You got to get real deep for Robbie Hummel, and like sound kind of like, if there's ever been a way to sound like uncoordinated by just speaking, that's Robbie Hummel. Like, he sounds like a guy that's just like tripping over things in everyday life.
I will say Robbie Hummel's a very good color commentator.
I knew you were going to say that, and I'm not taking away from his, ability to break down a basketball game.
I think he's better than Jay Billis, to be honest with you.
But the Billustrator?
Well, I also think that Jay Billis gets on this high horse about hating the NCAA and acts like he's the only one who hates the NCAA when everyone in the country hates the NCAA. And it's annoying.
ESPN Plus is best right there. All right, well,
the last thing I will say.
Okay.
The ESPN parading John Higgins' travel schedule on Monday night during Baylor, Texas, as it was like, let's give the man a Purple Heart. Look at all the mileage he's traveled. Is the most ludicrous, tone deaf, insane thing I've ever seen. Given the constant
especially after the outcome on what, like, game number 9 in 10 days is. Let's total 47 fouls in 40 minutes of basketball and a total of 71 free throws shot in K-State KU last night. Like that, what a backfire that was. I honestly, when I saw him in Austin Monday night, I was like, okay, there's no way he does the game in Lawrence on Tuesday. Like, they popped up the travel schedule, give the man a break, whatever it may be. No. And I'm sure he's going to be in Tempe tomorrow night or something.
They had him in Palo Alto for an 11 p.m. Eastern tip on Saturday night, and then they had him for a game that tipped off 14 hours later in West Lafayette. And it's like, oh, yeah, that's not a slap in the face to Purdue and Michigan State fans at all.
Well,
like,
look,
he's got his full attention on this one.
Hey, I am a John Higgins fan. Some would call us friends. But it was not a great look. We could scale it back by a game. Find another breather in there for
who has a better relationship, you or John Higgins, or Bill Self and Travis Kelce?
Oh,
I don't know.
Because Bill Self stopped himself short of calling them boys last night, but he did mention that they have a relationship, and hearing Bill Self refer to his relationship with Travis Kelce as boys was one of the funniest things I think I've ever
Well,
heard.
it was weird because it started as like, I think Bill Self was like, I'm going to be honest and be like, okay, we're not like, I don't know the guy or anything. And then by the end of it, it was kind of like,
No, we're boys.
I've been around him a few times. Like, okay. Yeah, he's my guy, whatever. And like, you got to see the experience last night, Alec. Again, taking off the hat of unbiased journalism here that I always wear, as you guys know, as somebody that holds a degree from Kansas State University and grew up in a household that was all purple. Yes, I do not enjoy the Kansas Jayhawks. I will make no bones about that. But let me tell you this. I do like Bill Self. Like, I love his personality. And last night in that press conference was like the showcase of that for Alec. Like, you got it like full on last night, Alec. He was like fun. And it's not just like that he was having some fun there. It was when he starts breaking down like the entire Big 12 and like schedules and how that's going to work out. He sounded like us going through B-ball, not nothing. I bet Bill Self is sitting in his office right now, and he is B-ball not nothinging the rest of the season. And he's run like 20 simulations today to try and figure out, okay, if we do this, do we win the league outright? If we do this, do we finish in 7th? Or are we the 7th seed? Like, he just seems like one of us, aside from the fact that he's a fantastic basketball coach that allegedly has committed some violations according to the NCAA.
So it's funny you mentioned
we've all been there before.
It's funny you mentioned the him being normal thing. I was sent a tweet earlier this week about it's from Crimson Quarry. That's like Indiana's SB Nation site. They tweeted because Indiana and Purdue play on Saturday in Assembly Hall, and they tweeted, "It's Purdue week, and I have a take. There's no secret to Purdue's consistency under Matt Painter. It's simply because for the longest time, he's been the only normal guy coaching in the conference," which is so true. And has Bill Self not been the only normal guy coaching in the Big 12 for the last 20 years?
Oh, I think Mike Boynton is normal. I think he's a bad basketball coach.
I think Bob Huggins is pretty normal.
Bob Huggins gets angry.
No, but I think Bob Huggins is like a typical dude's dude.
But the point is that like none of these coaches are normal, and Bill Self is the most normal person ever, and maybe that's why Kansas is really good.
I mean, I do think that helps.
I have no faith in Iowa State because TJ Otzelberger gives off big time CrossFit dude vibes.
He has massive arms.
I would agree. Just at least size up one on the shirt, TJ. Like, we'll still know you're jacked. It'll still be too tight. Go up one size, and that maybe that would help out some things. I don't know.
So if we did a Royal Rumble of Big 12 basketball coaches, is TJ Otzelberger the obvious winner?
No, because in a Royal Rumble, the obvious winner most times is not who ends up winning it.
Come on, Alec. It's Chris Beard.
But he's not a coach anymore.
No,
that would be the total WWE move. Chris Beard comes out from underneath the ring when it's like the second to last guy has run into the ring for the Royal Rumble, and there's like 3 guys duking it out in there. It's Bill Self, it's TJ Otzelberger, and it's Jamie Dixon that are left standing in there because Bob Huggins walked down, like got halfway down the aisle and decided he needed to sit on his stool and take a breather. And never actually got into the ring. And then
I
Chris
think Mark
Beard
Adams is in a similar spot, and I think Jerome Tang and Scott Drew are both just kind of soft and don't have interest in fighting.
They looked at each other.
They said, "We're here for love."
They did one of these things, hey, and they just like stepped out of the ring.
No,
and they just,
what Gabe said. Okay. What Gabe said. We're here for love.
I'm here out of love. If you've ever seen Porter Moser coach, though, that man, man gets in a stance.
Who?
Yeah.
Porter Moser, he gets into a stance.
Oh, that's a good sleeper. Porter Moser might be the answer.
Here's what we need to do. We should do that sometime. We got more time and to be zany and everything. We'll do a Royal Rumble with Big 12 coaches, and we'll get my man Mitch Fortner on here because he is the number one WWE aficionado that there is. In fact, one time I went to a Royal Rumble watch party with Mitch Fortner to enjoy that, and it was one whale of a time. So he would be able to give us the full breakdown. He'd probably give us some storylines in there and be like, hey, this is how Mr. McMahon would like set this thing up for the Big 12 and all that good stuff. So we'll do that. And if you didn't listen to the last 15 minutes of us on here, I'm not going to blame you for it. So go read EMA Online. We're a little bit more serious with everything that goes on up there. But enjoy the rest of your afternoon, morning, evening, whatever happens when you're listening to this. And we will have plenty of coverage, not just with basketball, but some football recruiting stuff coming over the next couple of days on EMA Online, and then the Cats and the Horns from Bramlage on Saturday.